Yeah, it's me again. I was thinking tonight, the internet is for two things: reviews and porn. Really, those are the two things that you'll find on the internet: reviews and porn. The web is already so ridiculously proliferated with all kinds of reviewers and bloggers and hyper-editors who will review movies and video games, old and new, good and bad, comedic and serious, all of it. Just so much out there that, for the most part, you may as well not even talk about anything, because there's already somebody who's done a better job of it than you can. But there is one exception to this that came to mind, something that kind of shocked me, and that would be printed media, like books. Now, perhaps the reason for this is because, actual printed media seems to have fallen out of favor. Hopefully there's still people reading as many books as they used to in the past, but with the TV and YouTube and video games and movies and just all these different types of spoon-feed to you forms of media, it's true, it seems like there's not as many people reading books these days. I don't know. Now, oddly enough, this little format here, where I'm just talking at a cell phone camera propped up against my monitor, as pathetic as that is, that format is oddly conducive to actually reviewing printed media, like books and manga and that kind of stuff. Now, I guess just as perhaps a test, maybe like an experiment, but I don't have any plans of making this a regular thing by any means, but this really poses a good opportunity for me to talk about some stuff, like to talk about some works of fiction that I've been wanting to discuss for a really long time. I've been wanting to discuss it, but the same things that keep me from writing otherwise really kept me from wanting to put the effort into it. I'd have to create a big, long blog entry that would be 10,000 words that nobody would ever care about, and I wouldn't even care about it by the time I was done with it, because writing is hard. Writing is, crafting words into shapes and meanings and ideas, and that's not easy. However, speaking, because it conveys information in a way that is perhaps inefficient, but also much easier to absorb, because this way is just kind of funneling through to your ears without you having to do a whole lot of work, and it's less work for me to produce it. So this format of me just talking to a camera does make it very conducive to talk about printed works, and I want to try that with some that I've been wanting to talk about but really haven't found the energy to do. Now, in my hopes of attempting to maintain some level of commentary on the Eastern media that makes it into the Western world here, there are three series of novels, like actual books, actual printed words, not pictures moving on a screen or anything like that, actual books where you read words, three series of those that I think are really worth talking about, and they're all just, ridiculously, stupidly popular. Everybody knows about them. You can find them in any bookstore. You can find text dumps of them online, unofficially translated. They're everywhere. Just all you have to do is go looking, and you'll get slapped in the face with it. And those three that I'm talking about, of course, would be these: Suzumiya Haruhi no Yutsu, better known in the West as Melancholy of Suzumiya Haruhi. This, of course. Spice and Wolf, obvious favorite there. And then, a little bit less known, haven't seen as much talk about this, Book Girl. I want to talk about all three of these today. Now, the reason why I think it's important to discuss the novels here is because these were the originals. These were the works that everything else within the franchise was derived from. Like in Haruhi's case here, I know there was a bunch of different anime series that were produced, and there was like that movie based on the Disappearance arc. There's a big manga series, all of that. But this was the first. This by Mr. Tanigawa-san. This is it. This is what started it. And that's why I think it's important to be aware of this. If you're a Haruhi fan, you're really doing yourself the favor. You're doing yourself the right thing by actually reading the goddamn books that everything came from. Now, there's a manga and an anime that comes from Spice and Wolf, but it started with the book. This was the original piece of fiction. And this one is not as widely well known, but I understand that there was a couple of OVAs, like a couple of one-shot anime episodes that were made based on this. Still, I see this in the bookstore, but I never see anybody talking about it. So I want to touch base on these. So these three, all three of them, the originals of their respective franchise, and therefore it's important to discuss them. So I guess we'll start with the most like nut-bustingly ridiculous, stupidly popular of all of them, this one. And of course, this is a global phenomenon. I mean, there's hardly anything that needs to be said about the story itself and Haruhi. But I remember, like, back in 2006 when the first season of the anime came out from Kyoto Animation. We had people all over the planet doing the Hare Hare Yukai dance. People still do it. I remember there was a con that I went to in northern Utah where there was just a bunch of teenage kids out in the courtyard in front of the hotel doing the Hare Hare Yukai dance. So this thing is still, ridiculous and stupid in popularity. But, I mean, ask yourself, have you ever done this? Like, have you ever read actual words here? This is where it got started. And, the author actually had to put the story together through simple text and no more. And at best, you get the occasional piece of light novel artwork, like there's one of the original catches right there, Haruhi looking all sad because the world's not interesting enough for her. Most people have not consumed it in this format, and that seems a little bit tragic to me because this is where it started. This is where everything began. So now there's been 6 novels of this. Let me check my notes here. Yeah, 6 novels of this that have been localized in the United States so far by Little and Brown. I think this is done by the section of... I'm tempted to say Yen Press, but I'm not doing my fact checking on that. So you could look it up if you really care to see who's publishing it. But this has gotten so far 6 localized volumes. And this is how I'm keeping up with the story. This is how I'm really consuming the Haruhi mythos, if you will. Because, again, it's the original. This is where everything came from. And if you get the original, like if you get where it started, it kind of seems superfluous to deal with the manga and the anime. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, those pieces of those adaptations of the story do have their merit. Like the first season of the anime was great. I loved it. The Disappearance movie was gorgeous beyond description. Loved that to death. In fact, with a little bit of guilt, I'll admit that I actually liked the movie adaptation better than I liked the Disappearance novel that you'll still see on the shelf up there. But even so, I mean, you can still enjoy those things, but you're kind of missing out if you don't, give yourself the opportunity to do that. So, for these 6 that have been published so far, I will admit that it's up and down. I mean, there's some parts that are really boring, and yet there's some parts that are very smart. Some parts that are incredibly intellectual and show urban contemporary fantasy application. Put that on your phrase of the day, toilet paper right there. Urban contemporary fantasy adaptation of intellectual concepts. Like, you'll see the author make use of things like the anthropic principle from cosmology. You see that in the first arc here. You see some advanced mathematics and some other things that get made into there. So there was some stuff with biology, like with the arc where they go into an alternate reality and fight a cave cricket, that kind of stuff. So this is very subtly smart story, and you get to consume it in a more pure sense when you're reading it in the novel here. So that's Haruhi so far. Not much more to be said about it, because everybody has watched and read everything that has to do with it, except for perhaps the novels, and everybody's got a general idea of how the story flows and such like that. But if you're a fan, read this. Good God, you owe it to yourself. Alright, so let's move on. Second one we wanted to talk about, Spice and Wolf. Now this one, this one for sure is getting localized by Yen Press. I'm not sure if the camera will let you see it there, but now they kind of, in my opinion, made a mistake by putting this ridiculous westernized artwork of some naked chick on the front. Thankfully, for every volume that succeeds this one, they have this style of artwork on a sheath, like a removable cover that you can pull off and throw away if you want to, as I did. And then you have like the real original anime style work on the undercover right here. Thank goodness too, because this stuff looks a lot better. So Spice and Wolf, of course, almost as popular as Haruhi is. Very weird, and it's not always readily apparent what's so popular about this. I mean, the formula is simple. Merchant wandering the countryside of some pseudo-old European country, attempting to make enough funds in order to buy his own marketplace store at some point. That's his dream and goal. And he ends up traveling around with a wolf goddess thing. And the formula seems pretty derivative of the standard magical girlfriend format. The story really has nothing to do with that. Actually, the vast bulk of what goes on in here is small town economics, as weird as that may sound. And I mean, I know that's been talked about and satirized way more than I could ever even hope to get into it, but it really, really, really shows in the books. It just gets so in depth with how Lawrence, the main character, who's the merchant guy trying to make money on his, trek through Europe or whatever country this is, how he makes money, how he loses money, what dangers he falls into for bankruptcy, and what opportunities he has to make profit and such like that. Very loosely, very much in a tertiary sense, you get stuff like this little capture of artwork right here, where it focuses upon the relationship between these two, but it doesn't do that very much. You'd think that'd be the focus of it, especially for, going at a story from the magical girlfriend perspective, but it doesn't. I mean, for the most part, it focuses on the adventure of economics, which is odd. Not necessarily bad, you can still make a good story out of that, but that's just unusual is all. So, now, as far as the relationship mechanics between these two go, that is far and away my single biggest complaint about these series, because I mean, what's the winning point of Spice and Wolf? What's the hook? What's the thing that captures readers into reading it? It's this, Horo herself. That's the real hook. That's the real selling point, because you got this cute sassy wolf goddess who is constantly giving our hero a run for his money, and I really, really detest their relationship mechanic, because this, so far, let me check my notes, has had 5 novels worth of this localized. I'm starting on the 5th right now. I haven't gotten through it yet. But 5 novels that have been localized on this. And there has been really no resolution on the relationship between these characters. I don't feel like I'm really spoiling anything by saying that, because nothing's happened. By definition, that's not a spoiler. And I won't say any more than that, really, but they're really leaving it as that uncollapsed wave function, which is, I mean, I know that's typical of a lot of Japanese media. It's the will they, won't they complex, but this is not a good thing. This is not something that I found to be actually acceptable or permissible. I want to have like a solid idea of where these two characters stand, and 5 novels in, they don't even know. I mean, there's lots of hints at romance. There's lots of hints at the two of them like getting together in some kind of a permanent or romantic or monogamous or matrimonial way, but doesn't go there. And this is bothersome to me. I mean, go ahead and focus on the economics of it all you want, but don't leave me hanging for 5 books. That's really uncool. I don't like that. So there's that. The other big complaint that I have about this series is it's not as big of an issue now, because they've gotten over the arcs where it was kind of repetitious, but for about volumes 2 and 3, I'd say, and to some extent volume 1 as well, the drama pretty much solely focused upon Lawrence, the main character, facing the prospect of ruin, like bankruptcy, and getting trapped in debtor's prison, or being sold as a galley slave or some shit like that. That was where the big drama came from. And throughout the emotional high-low of the story for about the first 3 volumes, everything seemed to revolve around Lawrence just barely avoiding ruin to go out and get kicked in the nuts another day. That's really all that seemed to be accomplished. That wouldn't bother me so bad if some greater purpose had been served, like if Lawrence had learned some lesson, if he had ended up helping somebody, if he had basically sacrificed of himself to reach the greater good for, the townsfolk or whatever, or if there was a deepening of the relationship with Horo herself. But none of that happens for those first 3 books. It's basically, oh boy, I just barely avoided getting sold into debtor's prison. Now let's all go do it again and run the same risks. And it didn't feel like any greater purpose was being sold. Thankfully, they got out of that. By the 4th and now the 5th volume, it's better, it's more interesting. They are still, leaving the relationship between these two not anywhere near resolved, and that's not cool, but, I'll keep reading it because I want to maintain, what's the word? Want to maintain awareness of otaku literature and its availability and its functions and up-to-datedness within the States. So, so that's Spice and Wolf. That's the second of the 2 we want to talk about. Now, the third is the more obscure of these 3, the one that most people don't know about, the Book Girl. Now, for those of you who don't know, the general premise of this is that there is a young guy who is somewhere in late middle school, early high school years, who made the mistake of writing a really just incredibly popular novel under a female pseudonym. and the popularity of it crushes him such that he suffers like severe panic attacks and incredible anxiety syndrome, and decides to just, I will never ever write anything ever again. I'm not going to even risk being popular. It's not worth it. Too much trouble. The price of fame, basically. So, and then something supernatural happens where he meets this girl, Toko, who is a goblin, a yokai, who gains sustenance from actually eating literature, like, tearing the pages out of a book and eating it. And she understands the story that way, like she actually absorbs the tale, but that's what she eats. And she kind of ropes this kid into, you're going to write stories for me after school as snacks. So kind of making him, breach his own resolution not to write anything ever again. So now that in and of itself, there's a little snippet of what some of the art looks like. That in and of itself is a pretty interesting premise, I've got to say. Again, it's another basis on the magical girlfriend idea. And again, I mean, any cliche can be made into a good story if presented properly and if developed properly. But the weird thing is that these books don't focus on Toko at all. They don't. I mean, the relationship that's between the young author guy and the book eating yokai here is basically non-existent. It's not developed. Nothing's talked about it. Instead, what the books focus on is various young people. We've got, these are the two I've read so far. There's a third that's out. There's 3 that have been localized in the States so far. The first 2 I have read. The third I'll be getting to. But what the books really focus on is young people who have suffered incredible trauma for one reason or another, and I won't get in too deep for story spoilers or anything like that, but trauma, and end up having these severe personality defects that really, really hinder their ability to function in the world. And there's kind of these mystery plots that evolve around these defective people that Toko and the author guy have to figure out. So now, I don't know, it seems kind of incongruous. It seems like these are, 2 puzzle pieces that are not really fitting together. It's like they're kind of there, but not together. It's kind of like, a vinaigrette where the oil and the water have not mixed. Or the oil and the vinegar, I should say, haven't mixed. The relationship between author boy and book girl, and then these, dysfunctional person mystery plots. The 2 are just kind of there in sequence, but have nothing to do with one another. So, it's weird, the way that it's written. Another thing that's worth mentioning, especially in the second volume here, this second volume, titled Book Girl and the Famished Spirit, is a really hard book to read. Not only is it written such that at many points it's kind of hard to follow, you're not always sure what's going on, but even with that, it's both a good and a bad thing, that even with that kind of hard to follow edness, there's a lot of really viscerally disturbing imagery that goes in there, like with anemia and bulimia and other eating disorders, basically, and forbidden sexual relationships, very, very nasty forms of child abuse. It's kind of a hard read, and it's really not for the weak of stomach to be able to read this. So I've got to admit, the second volume of Book Girl I didn't like all that much, but I still end up getting the third one, titled The Captive Fool. I'll get to this eventually, because once again I want to maintain some level of being in the know when it comes to Westernly localized otaku literature. So those are the big 3 that I wanted to touch base on. These are, not arguably, these are the 3 most popular of the light novel franchises that have gotten localized officially to the United States. So all of them are worth looking at, and there's a real decent possibility that you could like any of them more or less than I did. But again, I've got to reiterate: if you read the manga, the comic, or if you watch the anime, or if you watch movies based on this stuff or whatever, you owe it to yourself. You can't really call yourself a fan until you've consumed the original work, because this is where it started. If you really want to see where the core creativity came from these authors, you got to come here. This is where it is. So that's what I got. Thanks for listening.